It was 6:55 p.m., November 5th, 1997. The sun had just dipped below the horizon in Los Angeles, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. Inside LAX, the crew of a Virgin Atlantic Airbus A340 prepared for an overnight flight to London. To everyone there, it was just another routine transatlantic journey. But within 12 hours, this aircraft would become the center of an aviation nightmare, one that would push its pilots to the very limits of skill, instinct, and courage. No one on board that night, not the 98 passengers, not the 13 cabin crew, not even the captain, could have imagined that by the time they reached London, they'd be facing a landing so dangerous that Airbus itself would rewrite its manuals afterward. AKT-1, departure. Virgin Atlantic Flight 24 was assigned a modern four-engine Airbus A340-300, a sleek, long-range airliner with an excellent safety record. At just 4 years old, it represented the best of 1990s aviation technology, advanced computers, powerful Rolls-Royce engines, and a cabin designed for comfort. On the flight deck, Captain Tim Barnby, age 40, sat in the left seat. With more than 14,000 flight hours, 3,000 of them on the A340, he was the kind of pilot who inspired confidence. Calm, professional, meticulous. To his right sat First Officer Andrew Morley, 32 years old, new to the A340 but no rookie. He'd logged over 4,500 hours flying the Airbus A320 and BAC 111. Behind them was relief pilot Craig Matton, 28 years old. Matton would take turns at the controls during the long cruise, so the others could rest. Between them, they formed a seasoned, capable crew, the kind any passenger would want at the helm. As passengers settled into their seats, the last of the luggage was loaded, and 73 metric tons of fuel were pumped into the wings for the 10-hour journey ahead. At 8:58 p.m., slightly behind schedule, the A340 pushed back from the gate. The lights of Los Angeles glimmered through the cockpit windows as the aircraft taxied to runway 24 left. Morley was pilot flying. Barnby handled the radios. Moments later, the throttles advanced, engines roared to life, and Flight 24 lifted gracefully into the night sky. From the cabin, passengers saw the endless sprawl of LA drift beneath them as the plane climbed out over the Pacific. Smooth, steady, perfect. But inside the landing gear bay, something had just gone terribly wrong. Act 2. The hidden failures. Captain Barnby raised the landing gear. A small metal torque pin inside the left main gear assembly came loose. It tumbled free, clattering through the gear bay and out of the aircraft, entirely falling unnoticed onto the dark sands of the Los Angeles shoreline. The crew saw nothing unusual, just that the landing gear took a second longer than normal to retract. They noted it briefly, then continued their climb. They had no idea that this tiny pin had just crippled one of the aircraft's main landing gears, setting the stage for a crisis that would unfold hours later. 5,000 miles away. Once airborne, everything seemed routine. The aircraft turned northeast, crossing the continent toward Canada before heading out over the Atlantic. Dinner was served. Lights dimmed. Passengers drifted to sleep. Above them, the A340 cruised at 37,000 feet, engines humming steadily through the night. Hours later, while reviewing the aircraft's systems, the crew noticed something odd. One of the brake temperature indicators, the inner rear wheel of the left main gear, showed 2 dashes, meaning no signal. It wasn't alarming. A single sensor fault happens occasionally, but it was noted in the log. No one realized it wasn't a sensor problem at all. It was the first sign that the entire left landing gear assembly was now compromised. AKT-3, the descent into trouble. 10 hours later, the dark of night gave way to the soft glow of dawn over the Atlantic. Flight 24 began its descent toward London Heathrow. The weather was calm. A few clouds, good visibility, and light southern winds, ideal for landing. First Officer Morley was back at the controls, Captain Barnby beside him, and Maton monitoring from behind. At 3 p.m. local time, air traffic control cleared them to land on runway 27 left. Speed was steady, checklists complete, and flaps extended. Then came the moment, the one routine action every pilot performs before landing. Barnby reached forward and lowered the landing gear lever. The nose gear extended. The right main gear extended, but the left gear didn't. A gear unsafe warning flashed on the central display. Multiple amber messages followed, confirming their worst fear. The left main gear wasn't locked. They tried again. Nothing. For a few tense seconds, the cockpit filled with rapid-fire cross-checks and confirmations. They couldn't land like this, not safely. A gear-up landing on one side could cause the plane to spin out, collapse, or even hit terminal buildings. At 400 feet above the ground, the crew made their call. Go around. The engines powered up, and the A340 climbed away from Heathrow. Act 4. Troubleshooting back in the climb. The crew ran through every emergency checklist. They tried cycling the gear again. No movement. They tried the gravity extension system, which uses free fall and airflow to deploy the gear if hydraulics fail. Again, no success. Whatever was wrong wasn't hydraulic. The left gear was jammed solid. Air traffic control directed Flight 24 to a holding pattern north of London. Now, at 8,000 feet, the crew coordinated with Virgin Atlantic's operations center, just miles away at Heathrow. On the radio were engineers, the chief pilot, and the A340 fleet manager, all scrambling to help. They suggested pulling specific circuit breakers, resetting systems, even the classic up-down trick with the gear handle. But nothing worked. Minutes turned to nearly an hour. The aircraft burned precious fuel as they circled above the English countryside. It was dawning on everyone. This plane might have to land without one of its main landing gears. ACT 5. Impossible decisions. Diverting to another airport was an option. Manston Airport in Kent had a long 9,000-foot runway and fewer obstacles if the plane went off course. But time and fuel were now against them. At their current burn rate, they had barely 1 hour of fuel left. Before risking a crash landing, Barnby wanted confirmation. Maybe the sensors were wrong. Maybe the gear was fine. He requested permission for something almost never done at Heathrow. A low-level flyby over the control tower so ground staff could visually inspect the gear. Controllers cleared it immediately. As Flight 24 descended toward the airport, passengers looked out their windows in confusion. They could see Heathrow's terminals passing unusually close. At just 300 feet, the A340 roared over the runway and banked gently past the tower. Inside, an airline engineer stood ready with binoculars. His report came seconds later. The left main gear is partially extended. It's hanging in the bay, that confirmed it. The left gear was jammed halfway, neither up nor down. It was a nightmare scenario. Act 6. Thinking outside the box, climbing away again. The crew resumed contact with the fleet manager. With all standard procedures exhausted, it was time for creative thinking. Someone suggested a risky move. Come back for another low approach and try to bump the stuck gear free by touching down on the right side of the runway. A controlled impact that might shake the left gear loose. But this was incredibly dangerous. Come down too hard, and they'd destroy the right gear. Too soft, and nothing would happen. And even if it worked, they'd need to go around and land again, which they no longer had fuel for. As the discussion continued, a low fuel warning lit up. They were now out of options. Then, one final idea came from maintenance. What if you use G-forces in the air instead of on the ground? They asked the captain to bank the aircraft steeply and pull back, increasing the downward force to try to shake the gear into position. Barnby agreed. Without warning the passengers, He rolled the A340 sharply into a 50-degree bank, nearly on its side over London. Passengers gasped as gravity pressed them into their seats. Instruments trembled. The crew watched the gear indicators closely. Nothing. Even at 1.5 times normal gravity, the gear didn't budge. This was it. They would have to land with the left gear stuck. ACT-7, the emergency landing at 4:10 p.m. Captain Barnby declared Mayday to air traffic control. Every incoming and departing flight at Heathrow was halted. Fire and rescue vehicles raced into position along runway 27 left. The crew had only minutes of fuel remaining. Wind was blowing from the south, a crosswind that could push the aircraft left after touchdown. If they lost control, the jet could slide straight into the passenger terminals. So Barnby made a strategic call. He'd land on the left runway, 27 left, but aim for the right side of it, giving himself maximum space if the aircraft veered left. The plan was set, but one checklist item sparked debate. It instructed the pilots to shut down all engines just before touchdown to reduce fire risk. But Barnby disagreed. If he killed power early, they'd lose hydraulic control, meaning no steering, no flight controls, nothing. They'd become passengers themselves. So he came up with a new plan. One Airbus would later adopt officially. He would land on the right gear first. The relief pilot would then shut down the two outer engines, 1 and 4. They'd keep the inner pair, 2 and 3, running to maintain control, and shut them down only after the aircraft was stable on the ground. It was bold. It was risky, but it was their best shot. Cabin crew, prepare for emergency landing. Flight attendants braced their stations. Passengers were told to adopt the brace position. At 1,000 feet, the tension in the cockpit was palpable. Every checklist done, every system monitored. The city of London stretched beneath them as they aligned with runway 27 left 200 feet. Brace, brace, brace! The A340 touched down. Right main gear first. Engines 1 and 4 were shut down instantly. Sparks erupted as the right outboard engine grazed the runway. The aircraft lurched violently, shuddering down the tarmac. Barnby fought the controls, holding the left wing up as long as physics would allow. Then, with a deafening scrape, the left side dropped, engines tearing against the asphalt, sending trails of smoke and sparks streaming behind. Inside the cockpit, calm voices called out engine shutdowns in sequence. The aircraft veered left, tires burst, but somehow, the A340 stayed upright. After what felt like an eternity, it came to a stop. Every soul on board, all 111 passengers and crew, had survived without a single injury. AXT-8, Aftermath and Legacy. Within 3 minutes, the aircraft was fully evacuated. Fire crews doused the smoldering engines. Captain Barnby's unorthodox technique, shutting down engines progressively to maintain control, had worked so well that Airbus later made it the official emergency procedure for asymmetric gear. Landings investigators later traced the cause back to that missing torque pin, the one that fell off in Los Angeles. It had experienced higher stress loads than Airbus had predicted, causing the entire left gear to jam. Airbus redesigned the part and updated flight manuals to better equip crews for similar failures. Epilogue Flight 24 was a story of calm under pressure, of teamwork, ingenuity, and the quiet heroism that defines the best in aviation. In the end, what could have been a catastrophe became a masterclass in airmanship, a testament to how professionalism and composure can turn even the most desperate moments into survivable ones. And as the passengers of Virgin Atlantic Flight 24 stepped onto the tarmac that day, shaken but unharmed, they became witnesses to one of aviation's most extraordinary landings. Narrator: if you found this story as incredible as I did, take a moment to like, subscribe, and let me know what moment had you holding your breath. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.